My mother slid a cashier's check for $1 million across the kitchen table, and it wasn't for me. It stopped next to the mashed potatoes, in front of my sister Madison, and the whole room started clapping. My aunt cried. My father studied his fork. I remember the smell of pot roast and the sound of my sister's bracelets as she pressed the check to her chest like a newborn. Nobody looked at me. I was 29 years old, and I had kept that family's books for 7 years, and I sat there doing what I always did, the quiet math nobody asked for. 2 weeks later, that same mother told me to pack my life into boxes. And here's the thing you should know before we start. Being told to leave wasn't the worst thing my family ever did to me. It wasn't even close. 5 years later, they would come for the thing I built with my own 2 hands, and they would use my own name to do it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where women who got counted out sit you down and tell you what happened next. I'm glad you're here. If a story like this one has ever sat at your kitchen table, drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe because you're going to want to hear how this ends. The dinner had a theme, and the theme was Madison. My mother, Carol, stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon like we were at a wedding. She announced that the family was making an investment. $1 million, she said, for Madison's dream. A wedding venue and lifestyle brand called the Magnolia House, the kind of place brides drive 2 hours to tour. Madison did her pageant cry, the pretty one, the one that never touches her mascara. My Aunt Lorraine clapped until her rings clicked. My father, Frank, nodded at his plate. I sat at the far end where I always sat, and I did the thing that got me in trouble my whole life. I asked a question. What's the projected overhead for the first year? That was all. Asked politely, by the person who had filed this family's taxes since she was 22. The clapping stopped. Madison's smile went flat like a phone screen. My aunt looked at me the way you look at a spill. My mother set down her spoon, slow and deliberate, and said we could talk about the boring parts later, and everyone laughed the way people laugh when they're relieved someone else got stepped on. I want to be fair here. I wasn't jealous of the check. I've had years to search myself on that, and it's true. The money frightened me more than it stung me, because I knew what our family actually had, and I knew what selling everything to fund a dream costs when the dream doesn't pay rent. But my mother watched me over the rim of her glasses for the rest of that meal. Not angry, appraising, like a woman doing inventory, deciding which items had stopped earning their shelf. 2 days later, she called me into her study. My mother's study was really the store's back office moved into the house. A desk, a filing wall, and a notary stamp she'd carried for 20 years, sitting in its cradle like a little crown. She didn't ask me to sit. She told me the house was restructuring. Madison would need the space, the quiet, and the family's full attention while she built the Magnolia House. Then she said the part I can still hear at 2 a.m. You're 29, Mira. You have no husband, no plan, and no spark. Every dollar we have is going where things grow. I said I'd been running the store's books without a paycheck for 7 years. She looked genuinely puzzled, like I'd brought up the weather. That was your room and board, she said. This family invests. It doesn't do charity. I asked her where I was supposed to go. She straightened a stack of papers, tapped them twice on the desk, and gave me my answer. That's the first interesting question you've asked in years. You have 2 weeks. You're just wasting space here. Then, softer, almost kind, which made it worse. You don't water rocks, Mira. I stood there and felt the sentence go in clean, the way sharp things do. You don't bleed right away. I nodded, because I'm the kind of person who nods, and I walked out past the filing wall with my name in its folders. My W-2s, my license copy, my whole paper life in her cabinets. Here's what I didn't understand yet. Standing in that hallway, I thought she was cutting me out of the family. She wasn't. She was writing me down. And there's a difference between the two that would cost me almost everything, 5 years down the road, in a bank envelope with my name on it. The check bothered me for a simpler reason than pride. Math. My parents owned a hardware store in Harlow, Georgia. Hardware stores don't have $1 million lying around. That night, I went down for water and the study light was still on. Door open. Papers fanned out on the desk. I wasn't snooping. I was raised to read what's in front of me. That was literally my job. On top of the stack, a closing statement from a land sale. 62 acres off Route 19. My grandmother Ruth's farm, sold to a developer out of Atlanta for $1.1 million after taxes. I stood there with my glass sweating in my hand. Grandma Ruth had died 2 years before. Quick, a stroke in her garden with her gloves still on. And I could hear her voice like she was in the room because she'd said it to us. To both of us. Me and Madison. The summer I turned 25, standing in the bean rows. When I'm gone, this dirt splits 2 ways. You hear me? 2 granddaughters, 2 halves. She never changed the will in time. Everything went to my mother, legal and tidy, and the law doesn't care what got said in a bean row. So there it was, in 10-point font. The $1 million wasn't a gift my parents were giving Madison. It was a thing being taken, half of it, the half that was supposed to be a promise, and handed over at a dinner with clapping. I put the glass down and went back upstairs and lay on my bed in a room that had 2 weeks left in it. And a question opened up in me, cold and specific, the kind that doesn't close on its own. If they took that so easily, what else had they already taken? It turns out you can fit 29 years into 11 boxes, books in 4, clothes in 3, and 1 box that was just paper. My certificates, my community college transcript, the store ledgers I'd copied from my own records because old habits are load-bearing. At the bottom of my desk drawer, I found a postcard from Grandma Ruth, mailed from a church trip to Savannah the year before she died. A picture of live oaks on the front. On the back, in her stubby pencil, 2 lines. Saw a palm tree growing out of a seawall today. Grow anyway. R. I sat on the floor of my emptying room and held that postcard for a long time. Madison appeared in my doorway on my last night, leaned on the frame with a glass of wine, and watched me tape boxes. "Don't make it weird, Mimi," she said. "It's not personal. Mom just believes in me." I asked her if she'd read the contractor bids for her venue yet. She rolled her eyes and said I sounded like an accountant. I said I was an accountant. She laughed, and for 1 second it was almost us again, 10 and 13, before the pageants. Then she drifted off down the hall to her room, which was about to become 2 rooms, one of them mine. My father passed my door twice that night. Heavy socks on old pine. I knew his walk the way you know weather. Both times he slowed. Both times he kept going. I want to tell you he came in and said something a father says. He didn't. He left a $100 bill folded under my windshield wiper instead. No note. I kept the postcard in my glove box for 5 years. I still know both lines by heart. My last day at Stone Family Hardware, I trained my own replacement, a bookkeeping service out of Macon that cost more per month than I'd cost per year. I handed over passwords, walked the shelves one last time, and then, because paper is how I say important things, I brought my mother a single typed page, a request to be removed as a member of Stone Family Holdings LLC. You should know about that company. When I was 22, my parents formed a little holding entity for the store and the building. For tax purposes, my mother said, and put my name on it as a 20% member. I signed where the tab said sign. I never got a distribution, never had a vote that counted, and mostly forgot it existed. The way you forget a spare key you gave someone in better times. But leaving town flipped a switch in me. I wanted my name back. All of it. My mother took my typed page, set it under her stapler without reading it, and smiled at a customer over my shoulder. "Paperwork later, Mira. We're busy building something if you haven't noticed." I said I'd noticed. She was already walking away. I stood at the counter I'd worked since high school and rang up my last customer, Mr. Pruitt, 3 feet of chain and a padlock. And I remember thinking the register drawer sounded different when you know you'll never open it again. Lighter, cheaper. On my way out, my mother called across the store, bright as a bell for the whole town to hear. Drive safe, sweetheart. The performance of a loving family. Always, for any audience. The stapler still had my page under it when the door swung shut. Remember that page. It matters more than anything else in this story. The first night of my new life, I sat on a motel bed outside Valdosta and did what I do. I made a ledger. Assets, $2,300 in checking, a Honda with 140,000 miles on it, 11 boxes, 1 postcard. Liabilities, none, which is a strange kind of rich. Skills, bookkeeping, payroll, quarterly taxes, and the ability to be invisible in a room, which I was about to learn had market value. I wrote it all on motel stationery with a pen that skipped, and at the top of the page I wrote, Page 1. Don't let anyone tell you rock bottom is dramatic. It's mostly administrative. The next morning, I spread a map on the hood of the Honda and thought about where a woman with a head for numbers and no references goes. Cities want degrees. Small towns want history. But the coast wants hands. Fishing seasons, tourist seasons, charter boats, rental cottages. Every one of them a little business drowning in receipts, run by people too busy working to do paperwork. 3 hours south, on the Florida line of the Gulf, there's a town called Cedar Point. I'd been there once at 19, on the only vacation my family ever took that wasn't a pageant. I remembered the smell of diesel and salt and fried mullet, and a marina full of men yelling about invoices. I put my finger on it. My grandmother grew tomatoes in dirt the county map called unbuildable. Grow anyway. I checked out at 6 a.m., bought gas and a banana, and drove south with most of what I owned sliding around behind me at every stoplight. It sounded like my whole life rearranging itself. I decided to take that as a good sign. Before I could open a new checking account in Cedar Point, I had to close out my old paper trail, and that's when the floor gave a little. I called the bank in Harlow about a certificate of deposit my grandmother had started for me when I was born. My college fund, the one I'd been told wasn't performing when I asked about it at 19, the year I swapped university brochures for community college at night. The teller was young and helpful, and had no idea what she was handing me. The CD had been cashed out, she said. $18,000, withdrawn in full. A decade ago, when I was 19. Authorized signature on file. Carol Stone, custodian. I stood in a gas station parking lot with the phone against my ear and asked her to read the date again. She did. It matched the spring Madison turned 22, the spring of Madison's first business, an online boutique that lived 11 months and died owing money. The spring my mother sat me down and explained, with great patience, that college debt would eat me alive, and wasn't it lucky I was good at numbers without the piece of paper. I had asked about that account back then. I want you to know I asked. I was told there had been a bookkeeping error, and then I was told I was being disrespectful, and in my family the second thing ends the conversation. A decade. This didn't start with a check on a table 2 weeks ago. It started when I was a teenager, and it had a signature on it, and the signature was my mother's. I thanked the teller because I'm polite even when the ground moves, and I hung up and wrote one line in my new ledger. Find everything with my name on it. Here's what I did that week, and I'm going to be specific, because it matters later. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I closed every account with my name alone on it, and opened new ones in Cedar Point. I found one old joint checking account from my college years with my mother's name still on it. The bank told me closing it required both signatures. I mailed her the form with a stamped return envelope. It never came back. Fine. I emptied it to $4 and moved on, because you protect what you can reach, and you document what you can't. Then I sat in the Cedar Point Library and typed a formal letter to Stone Family Holdings, LLC, requesting removal as a member, and I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. 9 days later, the green receipt card came back, signed by my mother in her tidy notary hand. I put it in a folder. I know how this sounds. Who mails certified letters to their own mother? A woman who grew up watching that mother keep every receipt from every vendor who ever crossed her. That's who. Carol Stone taught me one true thing without meaning to. Paper is the only witness that doesn't change its story at Sunday dinner. But when I stopped by a Harlow Bank branch on my one trip back for the rest of my boxes, the teller squinted at her screen and said something that itched for years. "Ma'am, you're still listed as a member of Stone Family Holdings." Still listed. My letter had been received, signed for, and shelved. The same place as the page under the stapler. An LLC, it turns out, is not like a family. You can't be thrown out of one just because somebody stops loving you. You have to be released. And they never, ever released me. Cedar Point does not care about your last name, which is the nicest thing a town has ever done for me. I got a job cleaning offices at night. A dentist, a realtor, an insurance man. 6 to midnight, paid in checks that never bounced. Days I answered phones for a charter captain with a filing system he described as the truck. I ate a lot of rice. I learned that the smell of other people's coffee at 11 p.m. is its own kind of loneliness, and that you can be too tired to be sad, which is not a cure, but works like one. On the community board at the laundromat, between a lost cat and a boat motor, there was a flyer. QuickBooks certification course, 12 weeks, Tuesday and Thursday nights, County Extension Office, $400. I had $460 that month. I stood in front of that flyer with my clothes going around behind me and did the math 3 times, like it was going to change. My mother's voice did its usual commentary in my skull. No plan, no spark. Rocks don't get watered. I took the tab with the phone number anyway. Actually, I took the whole flyer. If I was going to bet my last dollar on somebody, it might as well be the one person who'd never once dropped me. Sometimes courage is loud. Mine was a personal check for $400, written on a washing machine, with a hand that only shook a little. The instructor took one look at my sample ledgers the first night and asked where I'd studied. "My mother's back office," I said. She laughed. She thought it was a joke. It was the most expensive education in this story, and I hadn't even gotten the bill yet. 14 months after I left, my Aunt Lorraine forwarded me a link with a row of exclamation points. Local news, Harlow, area family breaks ground on $1 million wedding venue. There was Madison in a white hard hat that had never met dirt, gold shovel in her hands. There was my father at the edge of the frame, looking at the ground he'd just bet on. And there was my mother, front and center, quoted like scripture. "We're a family that invests in winners," Carol Stone said. The reporter asked if it was true a local hardware family had committed their entire legacy to the project. My mother smiled that ribbon-cutting smile. "Everything we have goes where things grow." Standing in my rented room with the phone glowing in the dark, I felt the old reflex twitch. Call, warn, run the overhead numbers one more time, be useful, be seen being useful. I looked at that reflex like a lab specimen, and then I did the healthiest arithmetic of my life. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked Madison's. My father didn't have a cell phone, so he got grandfathered into the silence. Aunt Lorraine I kept, set to mute. Every family needs one unsecured channel, and hers had the best gossip anyway. Then I turned off the phone and stood at the window listening to a shrimp boat idle out of the channel in the dark. Peace, when it finally comes, doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a house after the guests leave. Quiet, and a little too big, and entirely, finally yours. It would be 4 years before I heard my mother's voice again. When I did, she was crying like her heart was broken, and it still wasn't an apology. I passed the certification in March and hung my shingle the same week, if you can call a magnetic sign on a Honda a shingle. Tidewater Ledger Company. My first client was Gus Tremont, who owns the marina at the end of Water Street. 68 years old, forearms like dock pilings, a man who once fixed a bilge pump with a spoon. His filing system was a shoebox that said New Balance on the side and taxes in marker over that. He dumped it on the counter between us and said, "The government says I owe $11,000. I say they're drunk. Settle it." It took me 9 days. Underneath the diesel receipts and a sandwich I do not wish to discuss, Gus had 3 years of missed fuel tax credits, unclaimed depreciation on 2 lifts, and a quarterly penalty that existed only because his old preparer had filed late. When the dust settled, he owed nothing and got $9,000 back. Gus looked at the amended returns for a long time. Then he looked at my invoice, which I'd written small because I was scared of him, and said the thing that built my business. "This number's wrong. You charge too little. Fix that, or I'll tell everyone you're cheap instead of good." He paid me double what I asked and told the whole dock anyway. Within a month, I had the bait shop, the ice house, and 2 charter captains, all shoebox men, all allergic to paperwork, all suddenly telling each other about the quiet girl who fights the government with a calculator. I drove home that first night with real money in an account nobody could sign but me, and I sat in the car in the dark and laughed until my ribs hurt. No spark. Sure, Mom. No spark at all. By the end of that first year, I had 9 clients and an office that was technically a Honda. I did payroll in the passenger seat, met clients at the diner, and kept every record in waterproof totes because I'd learned what the coast does to paper. Meanwhile, news from Harlow arrived the way it always did, through my cousin Jenna, Aunt Lorraine's daughter, who texts like a police scanner. Jenna is married to Deke, who does drywall, and Deke had bid on the Magnolia House build. That gave Jenna a sightline into my sister's dream that no magazine spread would survive. "Maddie fired the second contractor," one text said. "Says he didn't understand the vision." Then, "The vision is Italian marble, in a barn, in Harlow." Then, "They flew in a lighting designer from Nashville, for the chicken coop. It's a bridal suite now, but Mira, it was the chicken coop." I read those texts standing in line at the fish house and felt 2 things at once, and I'll be honest about both. The first was the cold, professional dread you feel watching someone drive a truck toward a bridge that's out. I knew what 62 acres of my grandmother's dirt had turned into, and I knew burn rates, and the math had a smell to it. The second thing was smaller and uglier and human, and it lived somewhere under my ribs. They chose this, over me, marble for the chicken coop. I didn't answer most of Jenna's texts that year, but I never once asked her to stop sending them, and you can decide for yourself what that says about me. In December, she sent a photo of the venue's new sign, gold letters on whiteboard, and underneath it, "Guess what the loan payment is?" I didn't guess. Some numbers you don't want in your head. Year 2, I rented my first real office, 1 room above Hutto's Bait and Tackle, with a window unit that spat, and a view of the shrimp fleet. Best worst office in Florida. The day I moved in, my mail forwarded over from the old rental, and in the stack, between a fishing catalog and a light bill, was an envelope that made my hands go still. A Schedule K1, Stone Family Holdings LLC. Tax year just ended, member. Mira Stone, 20%. 0 distributions, of course. I never saw a dime of anything. But there was my name, still riding along in their tax filings like a passenger they'd forgotten in the back seat. Except you don't forget a passenger for 2 years. You keep her because she's useful. I sat down at my new desk and wrote my second certified letter, cooler than the first, with phrases I'd picked up from a legal handbook at the library. Formal demand, membership withdrawal. Please confirm in writing within 30 days. I mailed it to my mother as registered agent, and 11 days later the whole envelope came back stamped, refused. Refused. Not unclaimed, not undeliverable. She had looked at my name on that envelope, at a post office counter, in front of a clerk, and said, "No, I want you to sit with the strangeness of that. This is a woman who told the entire town I'd abandoned my family. Cried about it at church, according to Jenna. And when my actual name arrived at her actual door, asking to be let go, she pushed it back across the counter like a bad check. You can't be released, I told you." I filed the refused envelope next to the green receipt card, label out, where I could see it. My folder was getting thicker. I hated how ready I was. That spring, I landed the account that changed my weight class, the Harbor Group, 4 restaurants under one stubborn owner named Rosa DeLuca, 12 sets of books between the restaurants, the food truck, and the catering arm. All of it tangled like trot lines. Their old firm in Tallahassee had been billing them blind and returning calls never. Rosa interviewed me at a back table with a toddler on her hip and asked why she should trust somebody who worked over a bait shop. I said, "Because I answer my phone, and because I'll find the money your last guy was too bored to look for." I found it in 6 weeks. A misclassified equipment lease and 2 years of tip credit errors, worth more than my fee for the whole year. Rosa didn't say thank you. She did something better. She called 3 friends. Here's the lesson Gus had beaten into me by then, the one I pass along to every woman starting over at 30 plus with a skill in her hands. Charge like you plan to be here in 10 years. The first number I quoted Rosa made my own throat tighten. She didn't blink. Nobody ever blinks. The only person who ever thought I was worth nothing got me for free for 7 years, and I've stopped finding that a coincidence. By June I had a waiting list, and I did something radical for a stone. I turned down work. Politely, with referrals, like a business that respects its own hours. The night I turned down my first client, Jenna texted again, a screenshot this time, from the Magnolia House's public page. Sunset, string lights, Madison radiant in white linen, arms spread wide under the beams. Caption, fully booked for the season. Jenna's one-line commentary underneath is still the best piece of financial analysis I've ever read. Booked ain't paid. The glossy article came out that summer. A regional lifestyle magazine. 6 pages. The Magnolia Miracle. How one Georgia family bet it all on a dream. I read it standing at my P.O. box. The photos were genuinely beautiful. Whatever else my sister is, she can style a room. There was the wraparound porch. There was the reclaimed oak bar. There was my mother in a straw hat, laughing in soft focus, captioned as Matriarch and Chief Believer. The article said bookings were strong and the family was already dreaming bigger. What the article didn't have was a single number, and I read financial journalism the way other people read horoscopes. I noticed what's missing. 2 days later, Jenna supplied the missing numbers in her own format. A photo of Deke at their kitchen table, holding an invoice, deadpan as a mugshot. Drywall, second building, 90 days past due. He's called 4 times. They put him on a payment plan, Mira. A payment plan. For 11 grand. Then the kicker. Also, the fall gala got postponed for weather. It has not rained in 3 weeks. I put my phone away and looked out at the boats, and did the quiet math nobody asked for, because apparently, that's just the shape of my soul. Strong bookings, unpaid subs, a postponed fundraiser, for a business that opened with $1 million in the tank and shouldn't need to fundraise at all. Under all that string lighting, something was already eating itself. I'd like to tell you, I felt sorry. Mostly what I felt was the specific vertigo of watching your childhood repeat its scale, appearances paid in full, the help put on a payment plan. My family had always run that way. The only difference now was the size of the invoice, and whose porch it would eventually land on. In October, my phone buzzed with a group text. Me and what looked like every contact my mother had ever collected, 200 numbers wide. I hadn't heard from her in 3 years, but there I was on the blast list, right between the pharmacy and the pastor. You're invited to an evening under the Magnolias, a fundraising gala celebrating our first amazing year. $500 per plate, tables of 8 available, family discount available. I read it 4 times. The audacity had layers, like a wedding cake. She'd blocked my certified letter with her own hands, told the town I was an ingrate, and kept me on the marketing list, because a contact is an asset, and Carol Stone has never once deleted an asset. And the family discount. For me, presumably, $500 minus the going rate for wasting space. I typed and deleted a dozen replies, each one a small courtroom. Then I sent the one that took no prisoners precisely because it had no blood in it. No. Just that. No punctuation drama from the person who used to write 3 paragraphs of apology for missing Sunday dinner. Jenna called me within the hour, cackling. She'd gotten the same invite. Then her voice dropped into its serious register, the scanner switching channels. "You know what the gala's actually for, right?" Deke heard it from the caterer, who heard it from the bank. I said fundraisers are what businesses hold when the word loan has stopped working. Jenna was quiet a second. "It's worse than that," she said. "There's already a second loan, a big one. And Mira, the caterer said your mama had to promise the bank all kinds of things to get it. I didn't know it yet, but one of the things she promised was me. Before I tell you what my mother actually promised that bank, if your family ever made you pay for a seat at their own table, tell me about it in the comments. I read everyone. And take a second to subscribe, because the envelope that shows up later in this story changed the price of everything I'd built. You'll want to be here when it's opened. Hurricane Odette came ashore that September 40 miles east of us, which on the Gulf counts as a near miss and still puts 4 inches of bay water in your office. I got the warning at noon and did the only triage that mattered. Client records first. I hauled totes down the stairs of the bait shop for 3 hours, loaded my truck to the headliner. I'd upgraded from the Honda by then, out of profit, thank you, and drove it all to a storage unit on high ground while the sky turned the color of a bruise. My own furniture I left to swim. Desks are replaceable. A shrimper's 4 years of fuel logs are not. Afterward, Cedar Point did what small coastal towns do. Chainsaws by dawn, casseroles by noon. And I found my own way to show up. FEMA aid applications and insurance claims are paperwork, and paperwork is my country. I set up a folding table outside the Baptist church with a hand-lettered sign, "Free help with storm forms." And for 2 weeks I filled out claims for shrimpers and motel owners, and a one-armed roofer named Cecil, who hugged me so hard my back cracked. I didn't plan it as marketing. I need you to believe that, because what happened next embarrassed me for a year. When the water went down, 15 new clients walked up my stairs, some still smelling of bleach, every one of them saying a version of the same sentence. "You showed up when it was free, so I trust you now that it costs." My mother taught me love is an investment that expects a return. Cedar Point taught me the opposite math. You give first, open-handed, and somehow the books balance anyway. Also, and this mattered more than I knew, the storm had knocked one particular house on the dune line halfway to its knees. The Kessler house sat at the end of Gullwing Lane, up on the primary dune with its shoulders square to the Gulf. 2 stories of gray cedar shake, built in 1961 by a boat captain who apparently framed it like he framed hulls. I'd walked past it every evening for 2 years. It was the house I nodded to. Odette took its roof deck, blew out the seaward windows and drowned its wiring, and the out-of-state heirs who'd been letting it rot finally quit on it entirely. It went on the county auction list that winter. As is, cash, no contingencies. I found the listing on a Tuesday night and sat with my laptop glowing in the dark like a fire. Here's what I had. $73,000 saved, dollar by dollar, 3 years of rice dinners and refused vacations. Here's what the flippers would see. A tear-down lot with a Gulf view. Here's what I saw. Sound framing, a survey that said the dune held, and math at midnight on the back of a deposit slip. Auction cap, rewire, roof, windows. 18 months of sweat spread across weekends I technically didn't have. I called Gus at 7 a.m. because he'd know the bones. He walked it with me that weekend, kicked a piling like he was buying a mule, pried open a crawl space and stood quiet for a long time under the floor joists. "Captain built," he finally said. "They don't make wood like this anymore, and the storm knew it. Buy the house, Mira." I said the smart move was probably a duplex in town. Gus looked at me the way he looks at a wrong number. "You've been nodding at this house for 2 years. I've seen you. Go get your dirt." Auction was the 3rd Thursday in January. The auction happened on the courthouse steps, which sounds romantic and is actually just cold. 11 of us, breath steaming, a clerk with a clipboard reading legal descriptions like scripture. When the Kessler parcel came up, it got quiet. And then it was me and one other bidder, a flipper in a golf vest who bid with his chin. 48, 52, 55. He chinned 59 at me with the bored confidence of other people's money, and I heard my own voice come out flat and final, a register voice, a voice that has counted what it has and knows the number cold. 61.5. He checked his phone. Whatever margin spreadsheet lived in there said no. The gavel, a literal gavel, Cedar Point does not upgrade, came down. And a broken house on a dune belonged to a woman who'd arrived in this town 3 years earlier with 11 boxes and a skipping pen. My hand shook so hard signing the paperwork that the clerk kindly pretended not to notice. That afternoon I drove to Gullwing Lane with the old brass key the estate had mailed the county. It didn't turn. 60 years of salt in the lock, and the key just spun my hope around and gave it back. So I did what you do. I dragged a crate under the east window, knocked the plywood loose, and climbed in through the window of my own house. And that was still the easiest door my family ever gave me. I sat down right there on the gritty floor in the smell of salt and old wood and bird, with sunset coming through the empty window frames in stripes, and I held that useless brass key until it went warm in my fist. Remember this house. Remember this key. Because everything my family does for the rest of this story, they do because of what this house became. And what it proved. The renovation ran on weekends and stubbornness. I learned to sister joists from a video and a retired framer named Hollis who charged in fish sandwiches. Rewire I paid for properly. Water and fire are where pride goes to die. Month by month the house came back. Roof, windows, a porch you could trust. And while it did, the firm grew past what one woman in an office over a bait shop could hold. So I hired Danny Marsh, 19, community college, a girl who talked to spreadsheets easier than to people and flinched when praised, which told me plenty about her house before she ever said a word about it. First week, she found a duplicated vendor payment 3 clients back that I had missed. I praised her in specifics, watched the flinch, and kept doing it anyway. On schedule, like physical therapy. You break the cycle in small reps, or you don't break it at all. Meanwhile, buying a house at county auction turns out to come with homework. Quiet title. My closing attorney's office ran the standard searches on me as buyer. Liens, judgments, entities. The boring proctology of American paperwork. I signed the authorization without a second thought. I had a clean freeze on my credit. Clean accounts. 5 years of dots connected and documented. I was, on paper, the most boring woman in Florida, and proud of it. The title clerk said the report would take 2 weeks. It took 9 days, and then she called me at the office at 4 p.m. on a Thursday, and her voice had that trying to sound casual sound that paperwork people get exactly when things are not casual. "Ms. Stone," she said, "quick question about your search results. Are you aware you're an active member of an LLC in Georgia?" I told her yes, unfortunately, and started my usual speech about the family company that wouldn't release me, and she interrupted, politely, with the sentence that rearranged my year. "The membership isn't the flag, ma'am, the activity is. Stone Family Holdings has UCC financing statements filed against it, recent ones. For those of you who've never had the pleasure, a UCC filing is what a lender records when a business pledges collateral. It's the public fingerprint of borrowing. My name was a 20% limb of a company that was actively, currently, pledging its body to a bank. And I hadn't signed, seen, or smelled any of it. The clerk read me the filing dates. The earliest was around the time of the Golden Shovel groundbreaking. The latest was fresh, months old. Whatever the Magnolia House was costing, Stone Family Holdings was helping pay for it, and Stone Family Holdings was still wearing my name. I got very calm, which people who know me have learned is my loudest alarm. I thanked her, hung up, and stood at my office window watching a pelican fail to land on a piling, and I thought about my mother at a post office counter pushing my name back across like a bad check. Twice I'd asked to be released. Twice ignored. I'd assumed it was spite, or laziness, or the general Stone allergy to admitting anything. Standing at that window, I finally ran the Colder equation. You don't keep a name on a company for spite. Spite is free, And my mother never held a free asset in her life. You keep a name on a company because the name is worth something to somebody. I just couldn't see who yet. I closed on my broken beautiful house 8 days later. And I hired a lawyer before I hired a plumber. Patricia Vance practices out of a converted house in town with a shell driveway and a paralegal named Bernice, who runs the place like a destroyer. Patricia is 61, reads operating agreements for pleasure, and bills like she apologizes, rarely. I brought her my folder, the green certified mail receipt signed by my mother, the envelope stamped refused, the K-1s, the title company's notes on the UCC filings. She read for 20 minutes without speaking while I studied her diplomas and her taxidermied redfish. Then she looked up. The operating agreement is the problem. Membership withdrawal requires approval by 51% of membership interest. Your parents hold 80. You hold 20 and a mailbox. I asked what my options were. Today, we send a third demand on my letterhead with statutory language that makes it expensive to ignore. We put them on written notice that you disclaim any participation, any debts, any obligations. And then, Mira, we wait for them to make a mistake. Because people who ignore 2 letters make mistakes. She slid a legal pad across and had me write out the whole history, every date, every request, every refusal. When I finished, she read it and tapped the page with one finger. You kept the receipt from the post office, from years ago. Why? I told her the truth. I don't know how to not keep things. My whole life, keeping perfect records was how I proved I existed to people determined not to see me. Patricia looked at me over her glasses with something I couldn't name yet. Paper doesn't lie, people do, she said. Keep every receipt. One day the paper gets to talk. And it's the only witness your family can't charm. Her third letter went out certified on a Friday. The signature card came back. Same tidy hand. And then, for months, nothing. The call came at 1 a.m. on a number I didn't know, and I answered because coastal accountants answer storm season phones. It was Madison. 4 years of silence, and she opened with, "Did I wake you? I don't even care, honestly." She was drunk in that careful way, where every word gets placed like stemware. Behind her, I could hear a TV and my parents' wind chimes. So she was home, on the porch where we'd shelled peas as kids. She talked for 11 minutes, and I mostly listened, because you learn more from a monologue than an interview. She said running a business was like drowning in front of an audience that paid to watch. She said everyone who'd clapped at that dinner now called her with questions in their voices. Then she found the old knife. You know what your problem is, Mimi? Nobody ever expected one single thing from you. You got to be nothing. Lucky you. I watched the ceiling fan turn and understood, maybe for the first time, that the check on that table had been a sentence for her too. Just a different kind, the kind with an audience. And then her voice went small and flat, and she said the thing I'd known was under there my whole life. It was supposed to be me. It was always supposed to be me. I asked her gently what exactly was supposed to be her, and the question seemed to sober her half a degree, because she got quiet. When she spoke again, the smallness was gone, and something rehearsed had replaced it. Mom says when it all comes right, you owe us. She says either way, you owe... And then she stopped. Not trailed off. Stopped. Like a hand had closed over the phone. The line went dead. I lay awake until the gulls started. Owe them what? The Magnolia House didn't last 3 years. It died in the spring the way businesses die. Slowly, then all on one morning. Jenna sent the photo before 8. The gates chained and zip-tied to the iron scrollwork Madison had flown a man in from Savannah to design. A county notice. The kind with bold print. Delinquent taxes. Pending tax sale. Behind it you could still see the white porch, string lights sagging like the party had aged 40 years overnight. 29% of businesses die from running out of cash, and I'd watched this one bleed for 2 years from 200 miles away. Being right about the math felt like nothing at all. That's a thing they don't tell you about being the family accountant. Madison moved back into my parents' house that same week. Into my old room, Jenna reported, because hers had become brand storage. Boxes of unsold Magnolia-branded candles where my bed used to be. But here's the part I need you to understand, because it's the hinge the rest of this story swings on. In Harlow, the story of the collapse got written that same month, and I wasn't there to check the ledger. The story went like this. Poor Madison. She dreamed so big. And the storms? And the economy? And meanwhile, her sister, sitting on her money down in Florida, wouldn't lift one finger for family. Jenna heard it at a baby shower. Aunt Lorraine heard it after church and, to her credit, argued. My mother never said it in the first person. She'd just tilt her head and let the town fill in the rest. She has always been fluent in implication. Within a month, a client of mine with Harlow relatives closed her account. No reason given. And that Monday, a bank envelope found its way to my name. It was waiting in the office mail between a supply catalog and a thank you card from Cecil the roofer. First Harvest Bank, Harlow, Georgia. Certified, which I noticed with a private, bitter little laugh. They'd learned my language. Inside, one page, and the coldest header in American English, Notice to Guarantor. Re. Stone Family Holdings, ILLC, Commercial Note, Original Principal $380,000. Status, 90 days delinquent. And then, my own name, set in the salutation like a hook in a lip. Dear Ms. Stone, as guarantor of the above-referenced obligation, you are hereby notified. I read it standing up. Then I read it sitting down. Then I put it flat on the desk and put my hands flat beside it, because they wanted to shake, and I don't allow that during business hours. $380,000. More than my house and the firm's best year stacked together. Payable, apparently, by me, on a loan I had never seen, for a company I had begged in writing. 3 times, certified, receipts filed, to release my name. Danny found me like that 20 minutes later and asked if I was okay in the voice of a girl who knows what a kitchen sounds like before something breaks. I told her to pull Patricia's number, because underneath the roaring in my ears, the professional part of my brain, the part my mother built, God help us both, had already isolated the load-bearing word, guarantor. Members of an LLC aren't automatically liable for its debts. That's the entire point of the letters LLC. A guarantee is different. A guarantee is personal. A guarantee requires a signature. My signature. Which meant that somewhere in a file drawer at First Harvest Bank, 200 miles north, there was a piece of paper with my name signed on it. And I had never signed anything. Patricia read the notice twice and got that stillness good lawyers get, the stillness of a heron over water. We demand the loan file today, she said. The note, the guarantee, the signature pages, everything. Her letter went out that afternoon. First Harvest responded the way small-town banks respond when a name on their paperwork starts asking questions, slowly, with great courtesy and no documents. A week of processing. Another week of, our counsel is reviewing. Patricia said the stall itself was information. Banks move fast when their file is clean. And into the middle of that waiting on a Tuesday evening while I stood in my half-wired kitchen eating crackers over the sink, my phone rang with a Georgia number I didn't know, and I answered thinking it was the bank. It was my mother. More than 4 years since I'd heard her voice, and it arrived already in tears. Not the pageant tears Madison learned from her, but something wetter and older and frighteningly convincing. Mira, sweetheart, I know so much time has passed. I know things were said. Things were said. The passive voice of every unswept kitchen in America. She didn't mention the bank, the loan, the notice with my name in its teeth. She said my father wasn't getting younger. She said Madison was going through so much. And then she laid the honey down right where the wound was, the way only the person who cut you knows how. We hear about you down there, you know, your little firm, your house on the water. We're so proud of what you've built, sweetheart. Come to dinner. Sunday. Just family. Proud. 34 years, and there it finally was. Right on schedule, exactly when my signature became worth more than my absence. I told her I'd think about it. and God forgive the 29-year-old still living somewhere in my chest. Some part of me glowed. I went. Patricia advised against it. The bank file was still dark, and walking into their kitchen mid-mystery was walking into weather. I went anyway, and I won't dress it up for you. 5 years of building a life in salt air and one, proud of you, had me checking my mirror at red lights the whole 3 hours north. The house on Cypress Street had shrunk the way childhood houses do. New gutters, though. I noticed maintenance the way other women notice haircuts. Inside, it smelled like Sunday. Roast, yeast rolls, the lemon polish my mother saves for company. My old bedroom door stood open just enough to see Madison's boxes stacked to the ceiling. Dinner was, and I say this with clinical precision, perfect. My mother made everything I loved at 9 years old, a menu assembled from archives I didn't know she kept. My father hugged me at the door a beat too long, then produced, from the sideboard, a shoebox of newspaper clippings, business page mentions of Tidewater Ledger, the little profile the county paper ran after the hurricane, my Chamber of Commerce ribbon photo. Cut out, dated in pencil, kept. My father does not talk. He archives. It's the only fluent language he has, and I sat there holding proof I'd been read about, tracked, followed, all those silent years, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom I'd cried in at 17 and press a cold washcloth to my face like a woman diffusing herself. Warmth was the one weapon I'd never built a defense for. They'd never used it before. Through the door, I could hear the good china coming out and my mother's laugh running the table. And on the kitchen counter, when I came back, I noticed a folder. Green, new, square-cornered, with a First Harvest Bank logo on the tab. They waited until the pie. My mother refilled my coffee, sat down straighter than usual, and folded her hands. Chairing a meeting, if you'd ever watched her chair one, which for 7 unpaid years I had. "We want to talk about the future," she said. Madison came alive like stage lights had hit her mark. The pitch had slides, actual printed pages in plastic sleeves. The Magnolia House, Chapter 2. Rebrand, boutique events, corporate retreats, intimate luxury. Madison's vision, and she turned a page and there was my name, in a serif font, under the words, Financial Director. My brain. "You're the missing piece, Mimi," Madison said. "You were always the missing piece." My mother took my hand across the table, and hers was trembling, and I still don't know which parts of that evening were performance, and which were a drowning woman's grip. "We were wrong about you," she said, each word placed like the good china. "You're the one with the head on her shoulders. This is your chance to finally be part of this family, Mira." And there it was. The sentence I had been saving a seat for since I was a child. "I want to be honest with you about the next 30 seconds because I promised myself I'd tell this part true. I saw it. All of it, whole, like a landscape from a plane window. Sunday dinners, my father's clippings on a refrigerator I had a key to. The word we, with me, inside it. They were selling it to me, and for 30 seconds I was pricing it. Then my mother slid the green folder across the table, the same gesture, the same tablecloth, 5 years apart, and said the number. "The refinance needs $500,000. The bank just needs your signature, sweetheart. You're the only one of us they trust now. The bank just needs your signature." Somewhere under the pie and the trembling hands, a vault door swung shut in me, calm and pneumatic. I didn't open the folder. I squared it to the table edge, habit, and said, "No," quietly, the way you say true things. "I won't be signing anything. Not this, and not anything else with Stone Family Holdings on it." For one long second the kitchen held its breath, and I watched my mother's face do something I'd never seen in real time. The warmth drained out of it like water finding a crack, and what stood behind the warmth had been doing math the whole evening. "After everything this family gave you," she said, and her voice had lost its tremble entirely, "you'd sit at my table and refuse." I said, "You gave me 2 weeks and a curfew for the boxes." Madison shoved back her chair hard enough to scrape and left. A door upstairs shook the wind chimes. My mother gathered plates with terrible composure. My father looked at the floor with the focus of a man reading his own verdict there. I picked up my keys and thanked her. For dinner, because I was raised right, which has always been the joke of this whole story. At the door, I stopped. I asked the question Patricia had told me not to ask yet, but I'm my mother's daughter and I wanted to watch the answer arrive. Mom, the delinquency notice from First Harvest. It came to me. Why would it come to me? My mother stood in the yellow hallway light and did not blink. I'm sure I don't know, Mira. Banks make mistakes. My mother has never believed banks make mistakes in her entire life. It's the one faith we share. I was in the car when the porch light came on. My father came out carrying trash that didn't need carrying, a half-empty bag, an obvious prop, 65 years old, and it was the best cover story available to him in his own driveway. He set it by the can, then came around to my window and stood there in his cardigan, worrying something square in his hands. I rolled the window down. For a moment he just looked at me, and in the porch light his eyes were an old man's eyes, and I realized my father had gotten old on the exact schedule of everything else falling apart, and had said nothing about either. Your grandmother liked you best, he said. Just that. First words of the evening. Then he pushed the square thing through my window. Pages folded in quarters, soft at the creases like they'd been folded and unfolded many times, carried in a work shirt pocket. Thought about. You should see what your name is on, my father said. Then he straightened up, took his prop trash bag, and shuffled back into the house he could no longer afford, and the porch light went off before I could say his name. I drove 11 miles to a motel on the state road with those pages on the passenger seat, and I want you to understand that I didn't unfold them at a red light. And I didn't unfold them in the parking lot. 5 years of discipline is good for exactly this much. I got a room. I sat at one of those bolted-down motel desks under a light the color of weak tea. I took a photo of the folded square, untouched, time-stamped, because chain of custody is a love language too. And then I opened my father's laundry. 40 minutes later, I called Patricia Vance at home at 11 at night. She answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting for months. It was the guarantee, a photocopy of a commercial guarantee agreement, First Harvest Bank, securing a consolidated note for Stone Family Holdings, LLC. $380,000. Guarantor, Mira E. Stone. And on the last page, above my typed name, a signature. My signature. Or rather, a thing wearing my signature's clothes. The M correct. The S correct. The little tail on the final E almost right. The way a mannequin is almost a woman. It was dated the previous October. I pulled up my work calendar with cold fingers. Because that's what I do. I check. Even when checking is a formality. On that date, I had been at Rosa DeLuca's flagship restaurant in Cedar Point until past 10 at night, closing out third-quarter books with 2 of her managers, 200 miles from Harlow. I have the billing records. Rosa has the security cameras. And below the forged signature, stamped and inked and serene, sat the thing that took my breath in a way the forgery itself hadn't. A notary seal. State of Georgia. Signature witnessed and sworn before a commissioned notary public, in person, the works. Someone hadn't just signed my name. Someone had stood in front of an officer of the state and sworn I was there, and the officer had agreed. That was the moment the dinner reassembled itself in my head, every course in its true order. The tears on the phone, the archive of clippings. Proud of you, sweetheart. The folder square on the counter before I ever said yes to Sunday. They hadn't invited me home to come home. The guarantee was already delinquent, already smoking. The bank was already circling. They'd invited me north to refinance a forgery. To get my real signature, at last, laid down over my fake one like clean flooring over rot. You're just wasting space here. 5 years on, I finally had the full translation. The space I wasted was never in the house. It was on the signature line, and they'd rented it out. Back in Cedar Point, Patricia and I laid the whole thing out on her conference table like a quilt. Exhibit by exhibit, the green certified receipt, signed Carol Stone, from 3 years back. The envelope stamped, Refused. Patricia's own letter, received and ignored. Every one of them dated before that October signature. 3 written demands to be released, and then a guarantee appears wearing my name, my work calendar, and Rosa's invoices for the night itself. Specimen signatures going back years because I am the woman who keeps things. Patricia looked at it all and said we had 2 roads. Road 1, civil. We deny the guarantee. We litigate against the bank's file. It takes a year, maybe 2, and costs you 6 figures to maybe win. She tapped the photocopy. Road 2. This isn't a paperwork problem. This is forgery, and that seal makes it worse. We put your denial in a sworn affidavit of forgery and send it to the bank with everything you just showed me. Banks don't defend forged paper. They cut it loose. But understand what's inside Road 2, Mira. An affidavit like this doesn't stay in a drawer. It goes to their fraud unit, their regulators. It becomes a referral. It reaches the state. I asked her to say the quiet part in plain English. She did. Somebody in your family committed a felony, possibly 2 somebodies. You sign that affidavit. You're not venting at Thanksgiving. You're handing your family to the state of Georgia. We sat with that. And then I said the thing I'd been carrying since the motel. The thing I could only say in that office with the redfish watching. Patricia, I could just pay it. $380. The house, the reserves. I could cover it, and this all just stops. Patricia didn't flinch. Yes, she said. You could buy them. The question is, what you'd be buying. While I was deciding, they answered for me. On a Thursday morning, a process server in a fishing shirt climbed my office stairs, verified my name with an apologetic little nod, and handed me a lawsuit. Stone versus Stone. Plaintiffs: Carol Stone, Frank Stone, Madison Stone. Defendant: me. I read it at my desk while Danny pretended very hard to be a filing cabinet. The theory sprawled across 18 pages, but here's the spine of it: that my professional skills were family-developed assets, that my 7 years of unpaid work created a constructive partnership I'd abandoned, that Tidewater Ledger and, they named it, they actually named it, the waterfront residence, were fruits of that partnership. They wanted $450,000, or, the complaint offered helpfully, equivalent participation in defendants' ongoing enterprises. Participation, in my business. Patricia called it what it was, a nuisance suit, built to bleed and to pressure, with maybe a 4% chance of surviving the year, and a 100% chance of costing me a fortune and every night's sleep until it died. 43% of small businesses get threatened with a suit in any given year. Mine just had my mother's name on the cover page, but it was page 11 that changed the temperature of my blood. Their attorney attached, as an exhibit about the family's good faith reconciliation efforts, his own engagement letter, proving how long they'd been trying to resolve this amicably. The letter was dated 3 weeks before the Sunday dinner, before the tearful phone call, before the yeast rolls and the clippings, and this is your chance to finally be part of this family. They'd hired a lawyer to sue me, then set the table. The pot roast was discovery. The pie was a deposition. My mother didn't invite her daughter to dinner. She staged an exhibit. My own parents' names, on a lawsuit, against the daughter they threw away. If you've ever been punished for building the thing they swore you couldn't build, put the words "I grew anyway" in the comments. I want to see how many of us there are. And subscribe now, because what my lawyer found in a notary logbook is the part of this story nobody ever believes. It's coming. Here's the thing about being raised inside a family's story. Leaving the house doesn't get you out of the story. Silence just lets them write your chapters. For 5 years, I'd let them narrate. Poor Madison, cold Mira, and I'd told myself dignity meant not answering. That Thursday, dignity changed jobs. I instructed Patricia to file our answer and to countersue. Not for money, for daylight. A declaratory judgment that no partnership ever existed and that the guarantee was void. And then I did the thing that, in a family like mine, is the real crossing. I called Jenna and I told her everything. On the record. No, keep this between us. The college fund, the refused letters, the forged guarantee with its notary seal, the lawsuit with the pie. In a family like mine, you can commit any crime except narration. Telling is treason. I told. It went through the county like weather. My Aunt Lorraine called me sobbing and stayed on the line for an hour. 2 cousins I hadn't heard from in a decade sent Bible verses that could have gone either way. And 2 more clients with Harlow kin quietly closed their accounts. I felt each one like a pulled tooth. Gus found out about that from the doc talk, stumped up my stairs and put a fist on my counter. Anybody asks me, I say you're the only stone worth quarrying. That goes on the record too. Then my mother's voicemail arrived, the last unblocked channel, and I stood at my window and listened to her measured, unhurried voice. No tears now. Tears cost extra. Deliver the eulogy she'd written for me years ago. I hear you've been telling stories, Mira. We gave that money where it could grow. You don't water rocks. Don't you punish this family for gardening. I saved the voicemail to 3 places. Evidence, yes. But also, some stones you keep in your pocket so you remember the road. Litigation is a tax on everything. Money, sleep, attention, joy. By midsummer, my legal bills had passed $38,000. I'd lost a client to sheer awkwardness, and I'd started doing payroll at 5 a.m. because dawn was the only hour the lawsuit didn't own. Danny carried the office through it. 19 years old, steady as a keel, leaving fresh coffee outside my door without knocking, which is the highest form of love a quiet person offers. Discovery ground along. Their side produced sludge, recollections, characterizations, a decade of nothing in writing. Ours produced paper. My whole beautiful boring archive, every receipt a little soldier. And then, one evening, Patricia called me back to her office after Bernice had gone home, and she had the photocopied guarantee under her desk lamp and a magnifying loupe out of her drawer, of all things, like a stamp collector. "Look at the seal," she said. I looked. Inked circle, State of Georgia, the notary's name ringing the edge with her commission number. Patricia's finger came down beside it, very still. Every notary in Georgia has a unique commission number, and every commission is a public record. Name, county, dates of appointment. She wrote the number from the seal on a legal pad, tore off the sheet, and slid it to me. "Run it, tonight. And Mira." She took off her glasses, which in Patricia is a siren. "When you see whose it is, I need you to call me before you call anyone else. Before your cousin. Before God. Are we clear?" The state's notary database is free and public and loads slowly, and I sat in my truck outside her office typing that number into my phone with the window down and the marsh crickets going, thinking, I already know. I typed it anyway. I'm the woman who checks. Commission number 2019-114-C. Notary Public, State of Georgia, Harlow County. Carol A. Stone. Commission 25 years, renewed like clockwork, in good standing. My mother's seal, on my forged name, swearing to the state of Georgia that I had stood in front of her and signed. The subpoenaed loan file arrived from First Harvest 2 weeks later and completed the arithmetic. The bank had been pressing for a personal guarantor since the venue's 2nd year. The file's internal notes said so in bloodless bank prose, family member with liquidity identified. When the note was consolidated that October, the guarantee appeared, sworn and sealed, and the pressure came off. And her notary logbook. She surrendered it under subpoena, because a logbook that goes missing is its own confession, showed the entry in her own confident hand. Date, instrument, signer, Mira E. Stone. Personally known to me. Then Patricia's handwriting examiner delivered the last brick. The signature wasn't my mother's work. The pen pressure, the letter forms, the telltale hesitation marks matched the specimen exemplars from a decade of birthday cards and pageant paperwork. Madison wrote my name. My mother stamped it true. One daughter's hand, the other daughter's name. The mother's seal binding them. The whole family business, miniaturized onto a signature line. I sat in Patricia's office holding the logbook photocopy, And what I felt was quieter and worse than tears. Recognition. She hadn't snapped. There was no desperate midnight. A logbook entry is deliberate. It's done at a desk, in good light, with the seal you've carried for 25 years. My mother had looked at both of her daughters and done what she'd always done, spent the one she didn't believe in to fund the one she did. Patricia let the silence sit, then asked the only question left in the case. "What do you want, Mira?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. The court ordered mediation for the first week of October, standard for family-on-family cases, a judge's way of saying, "Please don't make me watch this." The night before, I couldn't sit still in my finished house, so I walked the beach with my sneakers in my hand, and I did what I always do at the edge of things. Inventory. Column 1. Pay. $380,000. The house remortgaged. The reserves gone. But the lawsuit settled. The bank satisfied. And the door on Cypress Street open again. Sunday dinners. My father's clippings. My mother saying proud where the neighbors could hear it. Everything on the shelf I'd been window shopping my whole life, and I could afford it now. That was the poison beauty of it. Column 2. The affidavit. My name clean. The forgery named out loud. And my mother and my sister handed to the state I was raised to fear disappointing. No dinner table on earth would ever seat me again. Aunt Lorraine's number might survive. Might. I stopped at the tide line and took out the postcard. I'd moved it from the glove box to my jacket that morning, and don't let anyone tell you accountants aren't superstitious. Saw a palm tree growing out of a seawall today. Grow anyway. And standing there, I finally audited the account I'd been keeping off my own books for 5 years. The house with its proud straight roofline behind me. The firm. The folder of receipts. Who had I been keeping those records for? Because some part of me, I could see her now, in the dark, clearly, had been building an exhibit the whole time. Proof for a courtroom in my mother's kitchen, before a judge who'd ruled on me at birth. Tomorrow that judge was going to offer me a verdict. I walked home slow, and I let the question walk with me. The mediation was held in Valdosta, halfway ground, in a law office with a conference room, the temperature of a meat locker and art chosen to offend no one. They arrived 4 minutes late, which in my mother's grammar is a sentence with a subject and a verb. Madison wore the good navy interview dress, hair in the humble bun, a legal pad she would never write on. My mother wore church clothes and carried, I am not inventing this, a Tupperware of lemon bars, which she set at the center of the table like a flag on a beach. Feeding people has always been her opening argument. My father wasn't there. Frank's heart, my mother told the mediator, with a brave, small smile. And the true half of that sentence sat down at the table with us and stayed all day. The mediator was a retired judge named Whitfield, with reading glasses on a chain, and the patience of a man who'd heard 400 families explain themselves. Their attorney went first, and I'll grant the man this. He told a beautiful story. A devoted family, a modest fortune, a prodigal daughter who took her family's training and standing to Florida, and prospered while her people drowned. He used the word abandoned twice and the phrase family values until it lost meaning, the way a word does if you say it enough. My mother dabbed her eyes on cue. Madison stared at her blank legal pad, jaw set, playing a role I recognized from every pageant green room of our childhood. Composed grief, third runner-up. And I sat with Patricia in the cold, watching my family perform the story of me, and felt something I had not expected to feel on the far side of all that paper. Calm. The specific calm of a woman who has finally stopped auditioning for the jury. Patricia clicked her pen once. Under the table, her knee tipped against mine. Wait. We had one folder. We hadn't opened it yet. Their opening offer arrived mid-morning, dressed as generosity. They would dismiss the lawsuit. Walk away from all claims, their attorney said, palms up like a man releasing a dove, in exchange for a family restructuring of the outstanding debt. Translation: once Patricia shook the wrapper off, I would quietly take over the $380,000 note. The guarantee would never be examined. Mutual confidentiality, mutual releases, everyone remains family. He actually said that. Everyone remains family. It hung in the refrigerated air like a price tag. Judge Whitfield looked at us. Patricia said, "We'd like to respond with some documents," in the exact voice you'd use to offer coffee, and she opened the folder and dealt it out clean and slow. The pleasure of a woman who has waited months to let paper talk. The certified receipt, 4 years old, my mother's signature accepting my demand for release. The envelope stamped, "Refused." The engagement letter dated 3 weeks before the reconciliation dinner. Then the alibi. My calendar, Rosa's invoices, the time-stamped records for the October night in question. 200 miles of geography between me and that signature line. Then the examiner's report on the handwriting. And last, alone, the notary log page and the commission record, which Patricia set down in front of the mediator without a word of argument, because some exhibits you narrate, and some you just let sit on the table and tick. Judge Whitfield read. The room changed pressure. Their attorney reached for the log page, read it, and went carefully blank. The face of a man recalculating his fee against his exposure in real time. Madison had stopped breathing theatrically and started breathing for real. And my mother. My mother watched the mediator's face with the alert stillness I knew from 30 years of watching her count a register drawer that wasn't adding up. Whitfield took off his reading glasses. "I'd like to caucus with each side separately," he said. My mother spoke for the first time all morning. "First," she said, "I want 10 minutes alone with my daughter." They gave us the small conference room, the one with the humming air vent and a watercolor of a lighthouse. 10 minutes, both attorneys pacing the hall like expectant fathers. My mother sat down across from me, and I watched her take off the performance the way you'd take off earrings after church. Deliberate, item by item, until what sat there was the woman from the back office, the one with the stapler and the 25-year seal. I hadn't seen her undress like that since I was a child. It was almost a relief. "You were never stupid," she said. "So I'll say it plain. That paper out there ruins us. Your sister forged it. I sealed it. You know that. I know it. And that retired judge knows it by now. So here is what I am offering, Mira, and I will only offer it once." She folded her hands. "Pay the note. Quietly. Sign the settlement. Let the guarantee die in a drawer and it's finished. No charges, no stories, no shame on anyone's stone. And you come home. I mean it fully. Sunday dinners, Christmas. Your father has maybe 5 good years left. You'd have every one of them. I will stand up in front of this town and say we were wrong about you." She leaned in, and her voice did something I'd waited 34 years to hear. And it was terrible to finally hear it now. It warmed. "I will put your name back where it belongs, sweetheart." The vent hummed. And because silence has always been the one tool that works on me, she filled it with the only true gift she gave me that day. "You think I'm a monster. My daddy stood in our store when I was 24 and handed the keys to your Uncle Ray, because Ray had the smile. I stood on the sidewalk with my nose against my own family's glass. I swore I'd never split what I had into halves that both lose. I backed the one who shined because nobody ever backed me. That's not cruelty, Mira. That's how it works. I did what was done." And the strange thing, the thing I didn't expect after 5 years of rehearsing this room, is that I believed her. All of it. The sidewalk, the glass, the girl of 24 with her nose against her own name. I believed her, and for a moment I saw the whole assembly line, her father spending her spending me, the same coin passed down hand to hand until somebody either spends their own child or drops the coin on the floor and refuses to pick it up. She was offering me everything I had ever wanted. That's what you need to understand about that little room. This wasn't a trick, or not only a trick. The dinners would be real. The clippings would go on the refrigerator. The name would go back. Her word, where it belonged. All of it mine. Retail price $380,000 plus my silence, plus one working lie, sealed in a logbook. And sitting in that humming cold, I finally saw the flaw in the merchandise. The crack I'd been squinting past my whole life. If it can be purchased, it was never the thing I was starving for. A verdict you can buy tells you nothing about your worth. That's the whole reason you can't buy one anywhere honest. I had spent 5 years building a life that I told myself was for me, and it mostly was. But there'd always been one shelf in it kept dusted for her inspection, one exhibit waiting on a judge. I looked at the judge now. I asked her the only question left on my docket. If Magnolia had worked, if the million had grown, would you have ever called me? The vent hummed. My mother looked at me, and to her credit, to her terrible lifelong credit, she did not perform. She looked at me the way she looked at inventory, and she chose accuracy. She said nothing at all. It was the most honest conversation we ever had. Something in my chest that had been holding its breath since I was 9 years old finally exhaled. I stood up, lighter by one entire childhood, and opened the door. Back at the long table with both attorneys reassembled and the lemon bars sweating untouched in their Tupperware, Judge Whitfield asked if the parties had anything to state before he continued the caucuses. I said I did. Patricia turned her chair an inch toward me. We'd agreed I'd say this part myself, on the record, in my own register voice. There's no partnership, and there never was. And everyone at this table has known that since breakfast, I said. So here is my answer to every offer, made and implied. I will not be paying the note. I will not be signing a confidentiality agreement. This afternoon, my attorney is delivering my affidavit of forgery to First Harvest Bank, along with the examiner's report and the alibi records. And the complaint regarding the notarization goes to the state authorities in Atlanta this week. Their attorney started to speak. I wasn't finished. And we withdraw our counterclaims damages demand. I don't want their money. I don't want the store, the house, or 1 acre of what's left. I want my name out of their books. That's all I've ever wanted. I just spent 30 years calling it something else. The room went so quiet I could hear the lemon bars settling. My mother stood up, and for the first time in my life I watched her composure fail in public, watched the register counting stillness crack down the middle, and what came through the crack was not rage. It was disbelief. She had made me the one offer she believed no starving person could refuse, and I had refused it, and her whole arithmetic of the world hinged on that being impossible. You'd hand your own mother to the state, she said, and her voice caught on itself. Over paperwork? I gathered my folder, squared it to the table edge. Habit. You notarized it, Mom, I said. Paperwork is where you put me. It's the only place you ever put me. I picked up my coat, and I said the last thing I have ever said to my mother's face, and I said it gently. Because it was surrender, mine and hers both. You don't have to be proud of me now. You just have to be careful of me. I know the difference at last. She said my name once, quietly, Mira, like a door closing. I signed the affidavit in Patricia's car with the windows down. My hand didn't shake at all. Paper works slowly and then all at once. Within 3 weeks, First Harvest's Fraud Counsel reviewed the affidavit, the examiner's report, and their own file, and did exactly what Patricia said banks do with forged paper. They cut it loose. My guarantee was formally rescinded, the bank preferring one bad note to one public trial about how their branch accepted a seal without a signer. The lawsuit died faster. Their attorney, having seen the logbook, withdrew from representing them inside of a week, and the case was dismissed with prejudice before Thanksgiving. With prejudice meaning forever, meaning they can never bring it again, a phrase I had Patricia repeat to me twice, slowly, like a favorite song. The state's paperwork moved on its own clock. In time, my mother surrendered her notary commission voluntarily ahead of revocation, and she and Madison entered a diversion agreement. Restitution to the bank, admission of the false notarization on the record, no trial. First offense, her age, full repayment. The state wanted its integrity back more than it wanted 2 women in a courtroom. Some viewers will find that too soft. I understand. But I'd asked the prosecutor's office for exactly nothing harsher, and here's why. The sentence that mattered had already been served, in a small cold room, in the silence after my question. The only thing left was the parking lot. Madison caught me beside Patricia's car, out of scripts at last, mascara actually moving. "You could have saved us," she said. "You had the money. You could have just saved us." I looked at my sister, 37, magnificent, ruined, still holding the blank legal pad, and gave her the truest thing I had. "No, Maddie, I could have paid for you. It's not the same thing. Nobody ever taught either of us the difference." For a second something crossed her face that might have grown into understanding, someday, in different soil. Then my mother called her name from across the lot, and she went. The cost came due through winter, and I want to be honest about the bill, because this is the part the revenge fantasies leave out. My legal fees topped $52,000, unrecoverable, gone. The Harlow phone tree assigned me my permanent title, the girl who turned in her own mother, and 2 more clients drifted off, gently, citing nothing. Aunt Lorraine still calls, but on Tuesdays now, when her husband bowls, and I notice the scheduling and say nothing, because you take love in the size it comes. And one gray afternoon in January, my father called. The first phone call of his life, as far as I know, placed from the hardware store's back room on the landline, with the compressor running for cover. He didn't say hello. He said, "Your grandmother would have done the same thing you did. She'd have done it faster." A long breath, the compressor humming. "Don't tell your mother I said that." Click. I stood holding my phone in my kitchen for a long while. On Cypress Street, the for sale sign went up in March. The bank's restructured note and Madison's leftover vendor debts were getting settled the only way left, and my parents moved to a 2-bedroom rental near the church. I learned it from Jenna, and I sat with it, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I felt, because I promised you true. Grief, yes. And a terrible clean quiet, like a ledger finally closed by someone else's hand. The machine had eaten the machinists. It didn't need me for that. It never had. And in April, an envelope arrived from the Georgia Secretary of State, Stone Family Holdings, LLC, amended filing, membership updated. My name, released, removed, gone. A dozen years of paper ended in one line. I read it on my porch, and it weighed nothing at all. 6 months later, a gray sedan idled at the end of Gullwing Lane. It was a Sunday in October, 5 years and 7 months since the night of the cashier's check. I was on the porch with coffee and payroll. Some women take up watercolors. When the sedan crept down the lane, slow, the way cars move when the driver is reading house numbers. It stopped at my gate. My mother behind the wheel. Madison in the passenger seat. 3 hours, uninvited, unannounced. To talk, I imagine, or to see it. The way you drive past a thing to make it real. I didn't move. The gate stayed closed. The gate had nothing to do. It's a low cedar gate, and its whole job that day was to stand there being mine. What happened next, I watched from behind my own screen door, and Jenna later confirmed the family's version matched, word for word, because Madison told it herself. Crying, at Lorraine's kitchen table. My sister got out of the car. She stood in the sandy lane in the October light and looked at the house, the gray cedar shakes, the straight, proud roofline, the storm shutters I'd hung myself, the garden coming up along the rock border. And my sister, who once held $1 million in her 2 hands at a dinner table while a family applauded, broke apart in the road like weather. She screamed it at my mother through the windshield, loud enough that I heard every word over the surf. "Why does she get everything? It was supposed to be me." And my mother, I watched her, sat behind the wheel with both hands at 10 and 2, and stared straight ahead at my house like a woman doing inventory one last time and finding the count impossible. Here's what I understood, standing at the screen with my coffee going cold. The scream wasn't for me. Neither of them was seeing me at all, even now. Madison was screaming at the machine, and sitting at the wheel of the machine was its first victim, still driving. I stepped back from the door. I let the tide have the rest of it. The sedan sat another minute, then backed out of my lane. And that is the last time my family ever came to where I live. Life, afterward, insisted on being ordinary, which is the whole prize. Danny made office manager at 21 and cried at the title on her business cards, and I pretended not to see, per our treaty. The firm sits at 60 clients and a waiting list I guard like a garden fence. Big enough to matter, small enough to sleep. Gus threw a fish fry on the dock for my 5-year business anniversary and stood on a cooler and told the whole marina I'd once fought the government with a calculator and won, which gets less accurate and more beloved every year he tells it. Jenna brings her kids down every summer. Her youngest calls my place the Aunt Beach. And in the evenings I work the garden I built along the rock border behind the house, where the county map says nothing grows. I hauled the soil in myself, bag by bag, 2 summers of it, bedded into the seams of the limestone with compost and stubbornness. And now there's sea lavender and beach sunflower and one absurd tomato plant Gus mocks relentlessly and eats from anyway. My grandmother would have understood it on sight. My mother said you don't water rocks, and I've decided, after long study, that she was almost right. Turns out you can water rocks. You just have to bring your own dirt. Some nights I sit out there with coffee gone cold and the gulls arguing over the tide line, and I take stock. Assets, liabilities, the whole honest column. And the number that comes back is one my mother's arithmetic had no line for. Enough. It adds up to enough. Nobody handed it to me, nobody can call it due, and nobody gets to appraise it off my shelf again. Page 1 said grow anyway. Consider it grown. If there's one thing I'd carve over every kitchen table in America, it's this. Your worth was never the number they wrote next to your name, because people who make you buy their love are selling something broken. And the moment you stop renting space in their ledger and start keeping your own books, on your own dirt, you find out the accounting was wrong your entire life. You were never the rock in their garden. You were the seed they refused to water. And seeds keep. Seeds wait. Seeds grow anyway. That's the story. A cashier's check sliding across a table. A forged name under a mother's seal. A gate that stayed closed. If you've ever had to bring your own dirt, if you built a life out of what they called wasted space, tell me about it in the comments, because somebody down there needs your version tonight. Subscribe to Calm Drama Stories before you go. Next week's story starts with a birthday nobody remembered. You'll want to be here.